And now I'm going to welcome Reverend Forrest Gilmore. He's come all the way from Bloomington for us to hear the message, which we greatly appreciate. To stand in awe. Thank you.
How's that? We have sound? We have sound. Okay, good. It was giving me a red light there for a second. Well, I'm always grateful to join you. I think, I'm not sure how long exactly, but I've been in Bloomington for almost 17 years. Yeah, 17 years right now. And so, and I've been coming to speak to you for almost as long as that. So it's nice. It's like a long kind of tradition and history of being together over the years. I wanted to invite us into a time of meditation and prayer together. And to open this up with words from Rabindranath Tagore. He says, "Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Let me not look for allies in life's battlefield, but to my own strength. Let me not crave in anxious fear to be saved, but hope for the patience to win my freedom. Grant me that I may not be a coward, feeling your mercy in my success alone, but let me find the grasp of your hand in my failure." Let us now be together in silence. I invite you now in the space of this silence to call forth names of people or places or things that are on your mind and in your heart right now, things you wish to hold up in prayer or thought or contemplation or gratitude or concern and care. Let us call forth those names. For all these things spoken, these names called forth, and those that remain within the silence of our hearts, we cherish the bond that is this religious community. Love, 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 love. People, we are made for love. Love your neighbor as yourself, for God is love. Love, 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 love. People, we are made for love. Love your neighbor as yourself, for God is love. Again. Love, 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 love. People, we are made for love. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself, for God is love. Again. Love, love, love. People. People, we are made for love. Love your neighbor as yourself. God is love. you would stand, and let's try and sing it loud and proud. I think if you do it really well, we might even try for a round. Let's see how we're doing. We haven't done this in a while together, but I was feeling the spirit. So let's give it a shot. You've done it very well when we've done it in the past, so I believe in you. Ready? Here we go. Love, 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 love. People, we are made for love. Love your neighbor as yourself, for God is, and again, real strong. Love, 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 love. People, we are made for love. Love your neighbor as yourself, for God is love. I think you got it. Let's try it. So we're going to do round. This side we'll do the first part, and then I'll bring you all in for the second part. And then we'll go through it once or maybe twice if we got it. If we got it. Probably usually twice. It's good to always keep going until you actually get it right. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to start with this section. Okay. Love, 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 love. People, we are made for God is love, 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 love. Love, 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 love. We are made for, love your neighbor. People, we are made for love. God, we are made for love. For love, 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 love. People, we are as your, good job. For God is, everybody on For God is love. For God is love. For God is love. For God is love. All right, not bad. We'll keep working on it. We haven't sung together in a long time. COVID kind of messed up all our singing, and it's time to bring it back. Some years ago, I was watching Game of Thrones, and some of you may watch that too. And they introduced a new character called the High Sparrow. And the High Sparrow was a religious figure, kind of a little bit like St. Francis, very focused on serving the poor. He wore disheveled clothing, and he went without shoes, and he fed and engaged people directly. And he brought many people struggling with severe mental illnesses, diseases, and physical disabilities into his care. For those of you who have seen Game of Thrones, you know that powerful characters tend to turn into rather disappointing people. And that was also the case for the High Sparrow. But as an advocate for the poor, he did say some powerful things that got me to think. And one thing that he said really struck with me and has stayed with me for quite some time. And it's a difficult phrase, but it's an important one. He said, "The poor are hard to love. They disgust us because they are us, shorn of our illusions. They show us what we'd look like without our fine clothes, how we'd smell without perfume." And as I said, these are kind of hard words. They're very concrete, visceral, very blunt. They point to a reality that many people in more polite societies struggle to discuss. When encountering people in poverty, extreme poverty especially, we are more likely to witness some of the most horrific circumstances a person can experience. And for those who don't know me, I have a community ministry down in Bloomington where I work with people experiencing homelessness every day. And in that work and in our encounters with people struggling with that kind of poverty, we can witness human suffering that's very hard to take. We can witness physical deformities. We can witness cuts and wounds and unhealed injuries. We can encounter blood and vomit and urine and feces. We can witness arguments, yelling, fights. We can witness drug use, needles. We can witness people acting in very strange and unpredictable ways, like talking to themselves or making odd or even scary movements. We can encounter smells that we find uncomfortable. The poor are hard to love. They disgust us because they are us, shorn of our illusions. They show us what we'd look like without our fine clothes, how we'd smell without perfume. Another author, Martha Beck, she speaks of something similar idea. She talks about the deep-seated fear of becoming a bag lady. And not my favorite term, but a vivid description of a very kind of primal panic that many people have of poverty, homelessness, and social rejection. I bring this to our attention because I believe the main reason we as a culture and as a people are so hard on people in poverty, and this is very real in our culture, we're just so hard on people in poverty, is because they remind us of what we could and fear to be, that there's a feeling of our own fear that gets projected onto them, and they force us to feel something we don't want to feel. That's something that's really uncomfortable. I believe human beings are basically and fundamentally empathic people with a few exceptions. Most of us are prone to feel the situations of others, that we actually do tend to feel other people's situations. We connect with it, we relate to it. So when we encounter pain in someone else, we experience pain in ourselves. There's something called compassion fatigue, which is another term that's not my favorite term. I don't love it either. But the basic idea of it is it refers to a weariness when we regularly encounter hardship in others. And I much prefer the term secondary trauma, that we experience trauma when we witness the trauma of others. And what this means is that encountering the hardship of others is also dangerous to ourselves. I think that's important to think about when we talk about poverty, that encountering the hardship of others is also dangerous of ourselves. The pain of others can become our pain too. Not the same, of course, but as empathic people, we can feel that. And because of that basic human function, we develop many extremely complex coping mechanisms to avoid that pain. So that's really important, that not only do we feel that pain, but then we develop these kind of routines or beliefs or just actions that help us deal with that pain, often through denial, avoidance, pushing that pain away. Some years ago, I read an article in the Washington Post, and it's become one of the most influential bits of information that I've read on homelessness. The article was titled, "Americans Want to Help the Homeless as Long as They Don't Get Too Close." And the article talked about a study, a survey really, which evaluated people's support for or approval of certain policy choices related to homelessness. They asked about panhandling, they asked about public camping, they asked about homeless services and shelter and such and things like that, and they also asked about housing programs and what people, thought about all these things. And they found that, give or take, this is broad numbers, but that about a third of the people did not support any interventions or policies related to homelessness. They just outright and said, I don't want to help people, and I don't support things that help people who are homeless. And then they found another third that more or less supported all interventions and policies related to homelessness, that it was something supportive about people experiencing homelessness. These people said, yes, I'm supportive. And then they found this third group that was kind of surprising, a third group that supported things like shelter services and care and housing for people having those experiences, but they were opposed to panhandling and public camping. And to be honest, this breakdown of different groups shows very much up in our modern politics and very much in our local politics. It shows up in Bloomington all the time, which is supposedly a progressive haven, but we see these things happening all the time. And our community, the community I'm from, really comes together around services and housing, does some great work and great jobs around that. But I've noticed that our biggest fights around homelessness always involve the visibility of people without homes, whether it's about panhandling or public camping or any kind of scenario where people see a lot of people experiencing homelessness. That's when our community gets into fights about whether that should be okay or interacts with people who are homeless. In a follow-up study, going back to this survey, some people wanted to understand, okay, well, why is this? This is odd to me that there's this group that, would support this, but not that around homelessness. What's going on there? And the researchers asked people, they did another survey and another study and asked people similar questions, but they also did something different. They also did something kind of interesting, which is they did an analysis completely separate from the homeless question and issue of people's disgust response and to certain stimuli. So they basically did a test of, are you a person more prone to feel disgust or less prone to feel disgust? Again, completely unrelated to homelessness, just, what is your inclination towards that feeling? And they discovered something fascinating. That people's disgust response, the level and ease which one feels disgust, did not correlate with support or opposition to housing and services. So you could have a high disgust factor and you could be someone who might support homeless services like shelter and care and housing. But when they looked at things like panhandling and public camping, your disgust factor was very deeply connected and correlated to that. So the more disgust you felt, the more likely you were not interested in seeing people experiencing homelessness. In other words, the higher your disgust response in general, the more likely you did not support policies that would bring people experiencing homelessness into the public view. It's kind of a strange phenomenon, but I see this happen all the time with respect to homeless people. People use their personal experience of disgust almost as a weapon, practically declaring it a moral virtue. Because I feel disgusted, therefore what I'm saying is correct and moral and good. Because sometimes, something that makes them feel disgusted, they declare that thing to be wrong and they declare themselves to be right. And often this turns into very horrific things in all kinds of circumstances, not just with people experiencing homelessness, but turning people into animals, rats and roaches, non-human beings that bring disease and destruction. And we've certainly seen that in a whole host of circumstances, including present day in people's labeling of people. They fear, they defend, they fight. I unfortunately haven't been able to track down the author of this quote, but there's a quote that I really love that describes this so well. When they express this concept as prioritizing a politics of aesthetics over a politics of survival, prioritizing a politics of aesthetics, of beauty over survival. The poor are hard to love, They disgust us because they are us, shorn of our illusions. They show us what we'd look like without our fine clothes, how we'd smell without perfume. We so deeply marginalize the poor because they terrify us. They remind us of what we fear the most. They remind us of what we could be. They remind us of what we are. You know, sometimes you write a sermon and it doesn't take you where you expected to go. And when I began this sermon, I was very focused on the central quote for the title today, a great quote from Father Gregory Boyle, an amazing man who works with inner city gangs in Los Angeles. Some of you may have seen him. He came to Indianapolis a couple, well, it's probably 7, 8 years ago right now, but there's a local group, I think called Faith in Action, something like that, here in Indianapolis, and they held a conference and he came. Great, just amazing writer and speaker, as well as organizer of the work that he does in LA. And he wrote these words, which I just think are fabulous. He said, "Here is what we seek: a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. Here is what we seek: a compassion that can stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it." Again, beautiful quote, brilliant quote. Did you know that living in poverty creates the same amount of stress as not sleeping for 24 hours? That people in poverty basically live all the time as with the same impact, the same physical impact as when you and I do an all-nighter. But for the Gregory Boyle quote, may have to be a sermon for another day, because I'm finding myself connecting more with some other words, such as these words from Jean Vinet, founder of L'Arche, which is an international collaboration of communities for people with developmental disabilities and those who assist them. Made famous somewhat by Henry Nouwen, if you know his work, The Wounded Healer. And he said, somewhere there has to be a complete change, that we love people not because they're beautiful or clever, but because they're a person. Somewhere there has to be a complete change, that we love people not because they're beautiful or clever, but because they're a person. Or the words of Trappist monk Thomas Merton, he says, our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. That is not our business, and in fact, it's nobody's business. What we are asked to do is to love, and this love itself will render both ourselves and our neighbors worthy. Or the words of very own Hoosier Eugene Debs, good to bring back our Hoosier heritage. Years ago, I recognized my kinship with all living beings, and I made up my mind then that I was not one bit better than the meanest on earth. I said then, and I say now, that while there is a lower class, I am in it, and while there is a criminal element, I am of it, and while there is a soul in prison, I am not free. I learned early in my work with people without homes that I was most valuable, not necessarily in my ability to accomplish great things, but in my surrender to my own failings. That I was more relatable in my presence to my own imperfection than any kind of appearances of success or accomplishment. One of my greatest dreams in life was to be happily married with children. And I'm 55 years old, divorced, and with no children of my own. I also had a dream of being very successful and famous minister, offering spiritual guidance and social justice impact to the masses. kind of like Gandhi or MLK. Almost embarrassed to say that one out loud. I'm a person who's sometimes impatient and quick to anger. I'm a person who struggles with sadness and sometimes has trouble even getting up and out into the world. I am a person who judges myself, sometimes viciously, and judges others too. I am a person who is afraid of failure. I am a person who sometimes feels worth by perceiving myself as better than others. I am a person who is terrified of losing what little I have. I am a person who has trouble making friends. I am a person who gets mad at my dogs. As I say these things, I'm not asking you to feel pity for me. Please, please, please don't. I really don't want that, because that would immediately separate us. That would make us different. Because you're a failure too. And no, that's not all of you or all of me either. I'm not asking for any of us, God help us, to tear ourselves down, berate or belittle ourselves. That's an arrogance in its own way. When I was younger, I was feeling very down on myself, feeling worthless, honestly, and I was telling my dad about it. And he said something rather sharp and amazing. He said, that's pretty arrogant, because you don't get to decide. You don't get to decide your worth. You don't get to decide whether you're loved. It was amazing in that moment to know that my father was telling me that no matter what, he loved me, and that he was the one to decide whether I was worth. And I can see that as also having messages far broader than just him. When it comes to our failings, it's not about judgment. It's not about judging ourselves, saying, okay, I'm a failure and therefore I'm X, Y, and Z. It's about awareness. It's about presence. It's about finding those failings in ourselves and allowing ourselves to embrace them. For you, for me, for both of us to love ourselves, our whole selves, not just our successes, not just that part that is good, but all of you. Because then maybe you can love other people in their whole selves too. And that's when you become useful. That's when you become dangerous for the good. That's when you become love. Hallelujah and amen.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It's a lot to think about too. Thank you. For the closing words by Erica Hewitt, the hand in yours. The hand in yours belongs to a person whose heart is sometimes tender, whose skin is sometimes thin, whose eyes sometimes fill with tears, and whose laughter is a beautiful sound. The hand that you hold belongs to a person who is seeking wholeness and trusts that you're doing the same. As you leave the sanctuary, may your hearts remain open, may your voices stay strong, and may your hands remain outstretched.